Hey guys, this is Gevork again from Gev Loves to Read. I just finished reading The Outsiders 1 or 2 days ago, and I thought I'd make a video talking about the book briefly with you guys. So The Outsiders is written by S.E. Hinton. It was written in, let's see here, in 1967. She actually wrote the book, started writing the book when she was in high school, like a junior in high school or something, and she finished it when she was a senior, like when she graduated, and it got published in 1967. It was made into a book, into a movie in 1983. It's essentially the book that made her famous, and the previous book I reviewed, That Was Then, This Is Now, is kind of like a sequel to this book. And I believe the main character in this book, which is Ponyboy Curtis, I think he actually appears briefly in That Was Then, This Is Now as well. So it has similar themes to That Was Then, This Is Now. If you guys watch that particular review, you know, it's a coming of age story. It's actually this author apparently is credited with starting the young adult genre in fiction. So she's pretty influential in that. And you know, most of the characters are young. They're also mostly male, which I find interesting considering she's a female author. There's one female character, Cherry, that is mildly prominent in the book, but most of the main characters are male. And That Was Then, This Is Now was fairly similar. A lot of male characters in that too. There's a lot of violence in this book, just like in That Was Then, This Is Now. There's people getting really hurt, ending up in the hospital, several characters dying. This author seems to be quite comfortable with depicting violence. I don't know, maybe that was commonplace where she grew up in Oklahoma. I think the big theme in this book is the kind of this conflict between these two groups. You have the greasers, which are these kind of gritty working class kids, and then you have the socks, which are the more affluent kids from, you know, the more affluent part of town, and they just keep like getting into fights with each other for essentially no reason other than that group dynamic, just their different socioeconomic status within this town. And That Was Then, This Is Now had some similar themes that came up in that book as well. It seems to be the main theme of this book, is just this conflict between these two groups of people. And actually kind of reminded me when I was going to middle school. You know, I remember I was a little bit surprised when I saw these different like clusters in my middle school. Like in recess and lunchtime, there were these different groups that would hang out together. There was the Mexican corner. It was literally called that. There was the round table, which was a certain type of Armenian kids. And there was something called VTech and then E Squad, and there was all these different little groups, and sometimes they would have conflicts with each other. And I'm like, you're 13 years old, you're 14 years old, why are you, you know, behaving in a tribal way? You know, it didn't make sense to me. But this book has that theme built into it. And I think it also is a book about friendship, brotherhood, you know, and people kind of sticking up for each other. There's kind of this gang of friends and brothers that are prominent in the book. You have three brothers: Ponyboy Curtis, who's the narrator of the book, his older brother, and then the oldest of the three, his name is Derry. The middle brother is called I forgot his name. Let me look it up real quick. Soda Pop. Soda Pop Curtis. You have Pony Boy Curtis, and then there's a couple friends. There's Daryl, Dallas Winston, Johnny, Two Bit. These are kind of like a gang of friends that hang out together and they get into fights with the Sox. And then from the Sox, there's Bob, which is one of the prominent characters, his girlfriend, Sherry. You have Randy. So there's a few characters on that side as well. But the main characters are on the Greasers side. And, I don't want to go too much into the story this time. I'd rather just leave it at a high level, and then you guys can decide whether you want to read or not. But basically, there's like 2 or 3 major fights that occur between the Greasers and the Sox. There's one that happens with Johnny and Ponyboy, who are like 2 really close friends. And they get into a fight with Bob because of the fact that Ponyboy was sort of speaking and had like a friendly conversation with Cherry, who's Bob's girlfriend, and they kind of retaliated on that, and that particular conflict ends in something quite tragic, and Ponyboy and Johnny sort of have to flee the town because of what happens, and then there's some more tragedy that unfolds when they actually leave. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go too deep into the story and spoil it for you guys. But basically, I think if you're a young adult, if you've seen these kind of dynamics in your life, people fighting with each other because of different tribal affiliations, socioeconomic, race, ethnicity, you might find this book, it might resonate with you. But you don't have to be a young adult to appreciate it. I think anyone can appreciate it because we can all remember what it was like to be a young adult, essentially. And I'll just read a few quotations also from the book so you guys can get a feel for the author and her writing style. So this first one, it seemed funny to me that the sunset she saw from her patio and the one I saw from the back steps was the same one. Maybe the 2 different worlds we lived in weren't so different. We saw the same sunset. So the she referring to here is Cherry, who's the female character who's from the Sox. And then this is coming from the voice of Ponyboy. So it's pretty obvious what's being alluded to here. It's that, he's trying to say that there's some common humanity between the Greasers and the Sox. They both see the same sunset. But it just feels like they're so different from each other. They live in different worlds because of their just different economic status. But again, this is like the main theme that keeps popping up in the book. That's why people don't ever think to blame the Sox and are always ready to jump on us. We look hoodie and they look decent. It could be just the other way around. Half of the hoods I know are pretty decent guys underneath all that grease, and from what I've heard, a lot of Sox are just cold-blooded mean, but people usually go by looks. Again, showing the conflict between the Greasers and the Sox, and this one is kind of referring to the outwardly appearance of the two, and sometimes looks are deceiving, but there's just kind of this tribal way of talking that you get from the characters, where they just lump people in because of this thing and kind of stereotype each other. I had it then. Soda thought for fun, fought for fun, Steve for hatred, Dairy for pride, and Two Bit for conformity. Why do I thought and couldn't think of any real good reason. There isn't any good real reason for fighting except self-defense. That's coming from Ponyboy Curtis. And I think if you read the book, you'll see Ponyboy is a little bit more sensitive than some of the other characters. He likes to read books. He's a little bit more thoughtful and not as rough around the edges as some of the other characters. And he has some pleasant conversations with the Sox. So he doesn't buy into this narrative quite as much as some of the more rugged Greasers. And then And the final one is, "You read a lot, don't you, Pony Boy?" I was startled. "Yeah, why?" "I could just tell. I'll bet you watch sunsets too." And I think that was a conversation between Cherry and Pony Boy, um, where, yeah, like I just mentioned, that there's a little bit more to the Pony Boy character. He's a little bit more, less rugged, let's say, than some of the other characters. But sometimes he just kind of joins in on these fights just to fit in with his brothers and this gang of friends that he has. So, yeah, overall, I think this was an interesting book, and I think I actually liked That Was Then, This Is Now a little bit better. I like the relationship between Mark and Bob, Brian, and how that played out. But this was also good, and it's the book she's, I guess, most famous for. So I would recommend it to anyone who's a fan of young adult novels. And granted, I mean, some things if you're totally uncomfortable with a lot of violence and tragedy, this may not be the book for you. There's a lot of people getting injured, going to hospitals. There are a few characters that actually die. I won't reveal who, but it's pretty rough. And I'm like, man, this is, I didn't think being a young adult was this tragic. It wasn't for me, at least, growing up. And even the three characters that are brothers, their two parents died in a car accident. And actually, the previous book, That Was Then, This Is Now, the Mark character, their parents also died in a domestic dispute. So this writer seems to be very comfortable with a lot of tragedy and death in the characters that she portrays. But yeah, overall it was a good book, and if you're okay with a little bit of sadness and death and mayhem, I think you'll still end up liking it. So those are my thoughts on the book. If anybody has read this book or watched the film, let me know what you think, if you liked it or not. How does it compare to other books she's written? And like the video if you liked it, and comment below and subscribe. Have a good day, everyone.